Okay, the three acts of the mind. Sounds like a Shakespearean play, right? Yeah. This thing that we're doing here is called school. School is primarily an educational endeavor, yes, but it's education primarily of the mind. Now you might say, well, in school we also have things to do with, the body and motion and learning to write and things like that. And hopefully there's some education as to the human soul as well. But primarily it's an intellectual exercise. Wouldn't you agree? It's academic in nature. Okay, so the three acts of the mind. Here's my favorite quote about education from Mortimer Adler. Mortimer Adler said, "The primary, though not sole, cause of learning, wherever and whenever it occurs, is the activity of the learner's own mind." When you learn, whose mind is it that actually does the learning? Yeah, yours. Anytime anybody learns something, learning only takes place really if it's their mind that does the activity. Now, you may have assistance or you may have help, right? Because it's not the sole cause of learning, but it's the activity of your mind that actually produces learning. So, what is this activity that the mind does? And that's what I want to talk about. Okay? Three acts of the mind are very simply understanding, judgment, and reason. So if you write anything down, write those down. And they should be numerically in order. Maybe I should have taken these out and put in numbers. Understanding is the first act of the mind, judgment is the second, and reason is the third. Judgment can't take place until there's understanding, and reason can't take place until you have judgment and understanding. So they're in a particular order. Okay? Now, I'm going to add some details here. What we mean is understanding of the terms, judgment of the propositions, and reason of the arguments. Okay, understand the terms, judgment of the propositions, and reason of the arguments. And this is true not just for math class, this is true for all of your classes, really. If you're conscious of these things, it'll really help you sort out the different types of learning that you'll do. Okay, this is the mind's activity. Understanding the terms. First of all, a term, and notice it's in italic here, a term in logic is the subject or predicate of a statement. It's like the single expression of an idea. Now notice I didn't say word. It's not a word, because sometimes a word can have more than one meaning. Okay? Yes?
You copy all of that.
You write down whatever you think is important enough to write down. But I would ask you to at least write down the three acts of the mind. Okay? So a term. So if I said something like, oh, I don't know, red. Do you think you understand the idea that's behind that term? Do you think so?
Yeah.
What am I talking about? Yeah, color. Some of you are wearing red shirts. Okay. That's different than this term, R-E-A-D, although you can say it in such a way that it sounds the same. Red, the past tense of read, which is different, right? What if I said write? R-I-G-H-T. Is there more than one meaning of that word? Yeah, the term is the individual meaning. Okay, so when I say right, what do I mean? Do I mean direction as opposed to opposite of left, or do I mean right as in correct? Do I mean something else? Because if I stick a W here in front of this, it means something other, even though it sounds the same. So the very first thing we should do is seek to understand the terms. Okay, terms are either clear or unclear. And the terms answer the question what something is, what it is. And so the first act of the mind then is to clearly conceive or comprehend the terms being used. That's the first act. It's the most basic thing that the human mind does, that understands ideas. Okay? For example, human's a term. Do you understand what is meant by the term human? Do I have to give you a definition of what a human is? Or do you know? If there's one term that probably everybody understands almost instinctually, wouldn't it be human? Because we are human? I'm not quite sure what a human is. Like, well, wait a minute. You are one! Okay? And there should only be one meaning associated with the term. If there's more than one meaning, such as with the word bear, B-E-A-R, the term should be clarified to avoid confusion. What are some different meanings of the word bear, B-E-A-R? What could it mean?
Stand.
Ooh, I actually hadn't thought of that one. That's good. Bear like it can't stand it, or you can't. I think what you're getting at is the idea of to carry.
Oh.
But I was thinking literally to carry something. But you're thinking like, I don't know, metaphorically, it can't carry this load or whatever, but it's not like a physical load. What else? There's a bear as in the animal, right? Good. So if I said bearskin rug, there might be some confusion about what I mean. Do I mean a skin rug made from the animal called the bear? Or do I mean somebody who's carrying a skin rug, right? Bear, skin rug? Or maybe there's another word, if you spell it differently, B-A-R-E. Bare as in uncovered, like bare feet. Okay? So if there's confusion, you really need to sort out what the correct term is. And I remember one time I was teaching a middle school logic class, and it was so good. I got the class really involved in an argument. It's wonderful. Because I was talking about this term right here. Delicious apples. And I said, I went to the store and I bought a bag of delicious apples. And when I bit one, it didn't taste very good, so I asked for my money back. And there was a debate over whether the store should give me my money back. And they didn't realize that there was a confusion over what I meant by delicious apples. What's one meaning of delicious apples? What? You can't use the word to describe what the word means. That's a certain. They taste good, right? Yeah, they taste good. In fact, that's the common understanding usually. If you say delicious apple, people think, oh, okay. But there's an alternate meaning of delicious. What would the alternate meaning be? That's what she just said. She said the name of the apple. Yeah, because if you go to the store, there's an apple that's called delicious. And maybe they're trying to imply the taste, but that's actually like the particular species or type of apple. So there's like a red delicious apple. And so the class was actually getting into an argument over whether the store should give me my money back, but what they didn't realize is some of the students were thinking that I meant delicious in terms of taste. Other students were thinking, well, he bought a bag that said red delicious apples on it. Why should the store give you a refund? That's what they are. And so there was this argument that was going on. The problem was that they were using the terms ambiguously. They didn't understand that there was an alternate meaning of what delicious apple can be. And it's funny because that's oftentimes what happens when people argue. When they really get down to it, they don't disagree. They're just using the terms differently. There's a misunderstanding of what the person's meaning. So a great question that you could ask is, what do you mean by that? Explain what you mean when you say this. Because sometimes I found, oh, when somebody explains what their meaning is, I really agree with them. But at first, I thought they meant something else, and I was getting ready to argue. Okay, so this is where this quote comes from. Seek first to understand, then be understood. When you're going to involve yourself in a dialogue with somebody, try real hard at first to figure out what they're saying, which is difficult, because oftentimes we think we know what they're going to say, and we disagree with that, and so we automatically form our argument back at them. Don't ever listen. So we wind up fighting about things when really in the end we don't disagree. We're just misunderstanding each other. Okay? So the first act of the mind would be to understand. Next, judgment of the propositions. Okay, proposition, whoops, too fast. Proposition is a declarative statement, a statement that tells something that's either true or not true, that relates the terms to each other. So I could actually relate these two together. I could say delicious apples are red. Here I've got two terms, and now I'm making a declarative statement about them. What your mind automatically does is it seeks to identify that statement as true or false. Are delicious apples red?
Yes.
Well, first you have to agree on what we mean by delicious, right? Okay. Let's just say apples that taste good. Maybe. Okay. Here's an apple. It's a gala, which is what I think a delicious apple should be. If you're going to call an apple delicious, it should be a gala apple. Because when I say delicious, I mean it tastes good. I remember the first time I bought a bag of delicious apples and bit one. I thought, this is nasty. Why do they call this stuff delicious? Okay. But delicious apples are red. Okay, we're relating two terms together. and your mind is looking to see whether or not it's a true or false statement. Okay? So propositions are either true or false. Propositions aren't clear or unclear, those are the terms. Okay? And propositions answer the question whether something is. Is it or isn't it? Okay, so the second act of the mind is to judge propositions as true or false. And when we say true, true in the common understanding is corresponding to reality. Is it saying something that is in existence or in does reality reflect this idea? Okay, for example, here's a proposition. All humans are mortal. Do you understand the terms, first of all? Do you understand what is meant by the term humans? Do you understand what is meant by mortal? And then you have to decide whether or not this is a true statement. Are all humans mortal? Say yes, right? Okay. But the problem is there's no one simple way to determine if any proposition is true. Sometimes it's really, really hard. Okay? The grass is green, true or false? True. Pigs can fly, true or false? Okay. Windermere Prep is the best school in Central Florida. Somebody said false. Well, I would like that to be true. I would perhaps have some very good arguments as to why it is. But sometimes it's difficult maybe to sort things out. Okay. So, judgment of the propositions, deciding whether propositions are true or false. Now, judgment recently has got a bad rap. The term judgment oftentimes is misused. We use it in place of a word like condemnation. We seem to think that all judgment means something that's bad, right? People say what? What do people say when they get insulted for what they wear or something like that? They say what? Don't judge me. You're like, well, wait a second. Are you really saying don't ever judge me? Or are you saying don't condemn me because of this? Okay? We judge all the time. In fact, it's almost inhuman not to judge. What? This is school, right? I'm going to ask you folks questions. You're going to provide for me answers, and then what am I going to do with them? I'm going to judge them. That's my job, right? In your peer groups, you're constantly judging one another. And I don't mean condemnation. I mean you're evaluating each other in terms of how you treat each other, in terms of on the sports team, so-and-so's a good player or not a good player. I will, they're faster than me, they're not faster than me. This professor check's going to judge your uniforms and things like that. It's not always a bad thing. It's simply making a decision, okay? So proper and right judgment, such as things being good or bad, true or false, right or wrong, is essential for human existence. When you go to the store and you select things as opposed to other things, you're exercising judgment. Hopefully the judgment is good. When I go to the store and I pick up a Gala apple, I'm judging the apples. Yeah, I'm saying I like that one better. Somebody else may say, well, I like this one better. So maybe that's a matter of interpretation. Mathematics isn't, though, right? Mathematics should be very objective. Okay? Just because folks have had trouble judging for bad reasons doesn't mean that we all of a sudden say nobody judges anything anymore anywhere. We judge a lot. When the cop zaps you with his radar gun when you were driving down the road, he's going to make a judgment, right? You would hope that he would judge rightly and not pull you over for doing a 35 and a 40 and give you a ticket, driving too slow. You recognize this gentleman?
Yes.
Yeah? I love this statement. This is great. This is Martin Luther King from his I Have a Dream speech. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin. Don't watch that word. But by the content of their character. See, he's not saying don't judge. He's saying judge rightly. Judging people's value or good or bad or so forth by the color of their skin, that's an improper judgment. That's not judging rightly. Okay? We should be judging people, making evaluations because of the content and character that we have. And we should be hopefully developing good character. College admissions, when they get your application, what are they doing? They're judging, right? We judge all the time. It's almost inhuman to say that you don't judge. I don't judge anything anywhere. Well, you can't make a decision then, right? You're always supposed to be judging rightly. Okay. Next, reasoning of the arguments. Once you understand the terms, and once your mind is judging the propositions as true or false, next comes reasoning. Okay. An argument is 2 or more propositions that necessarily, and that's the key word there, necessarily yield a conclusion based on the rules of logic. Necessarily means it must be true. to be true. If this is true and if that is true, then this conclusion must be true. There's no doubt about it. It's certain. Okay? Arguments are either valid or invalid. And an argument answers the question why something is. Okay, so the third act of the mind is reasoning. Okay, determining if arguments are valid or invalid. Okay? Now, follow this example. All humans are mortal. Do you understand the terms? Humans, mortal, right? Is this a true statement? All humans are mortal? Okay, so you're understanding the terms. You're judging the propositions as true or false. Okay, here's another one. I am a human. And this word here is key. Therefore, I am mortal. Would you agree with that? Do you agree that I'm mortal? But it's more important than just agreeing with the conclusion. Would you agree with the conclusion must be true, which is what therefore means, because these first things are true? If it's true that all humans are mortal, and if it's true that I am a human, I must therefore, right, because of this, I must be mortal. Do you follow the logic? Okay. Logic then is this act of reasoning. This argument's not valid. Okay. All humans are mortal. All dogs are mortal. Therefore, I'm a dog. These are both true statements, aren't they? But the two of those do not logically produce the third statement. This doesn't have to be true if these two are true. So there's a problem here with the logic. Sometimes there's not a problem with the logic. Sometimes there's a problem with the terms and so forth. Okay? So just because you might disagree with the conclusion doesn't mean that the logic is therefore bad. Okay? So simply having a false conclusion does not make the argument invalid. An argument's invalid only because the conclusion does not logically follow from the premises. And we'll do more about this later on. Our goal in exercising reasoning and argumentation, though, should not be to simply vanquish an enemy, but to persuade an ally. Do you understand the difference? Not to defeat a rival, but to gain a friend. People can use logic for two different ways. They can use it to put the thumb on somebody and squish somebody and, quote, win. But I think a better way would be to actually be persuasive. What you're trying to do, hopefully, with logic and reasoning is you're trying to convince the other person to come over to your side. In the end, then that makes two of you that are a team, rather than simply being the victor and you got your foot on the neck of your enemy. Ha ha, I've won. Yeah, okay, but at what cost? Wouldn't it be better to actually convince the other person? And that's what I'll be doing in math class. My goal will be convincing, to be winsome, to come around and not just say, oh, your math is wrong, here's the right answer, but to convince you of the truth of these things, to sway you over to my side. So deductive argument succeeds in proving its conclusion to be true if and only if all three are met. Okay? Here's how a deductive process works. All the terms have to be clear and not ambiguous. We're going to focus a lot on vocabulary. Okay? All the propositions must be true. If we're going to go down through a list of mathematical reasons, we have to check the truthness of each one of those things. And then in the end, the argument must be logically valid. The answer should be the answer because it must be the answer. And a lot of times students just want to get the answer and say, ha ha, I've done mathematics because I have somehow produced an answer. Mathematics has never been about what the right answer is. Mathematics is always about showing why the right answer must be the right answer. And that involves a method. If you're going to reject a deductive argument, you've got to find one of these problems. Hey, a term that you used is ambiguous. You guys are using the same word, but you don't mean the same thing. Okay? Proposition is false somewhere that you've overlooked, or the argument's invalid. Okay, so to wrap it up now, here's what I want to use out of this. Okay? For the three acts of the mind, we should first seek to understand. It takes work sometimes. Ask good clarification questions. If you're not quite sure what I'm talking about, ask me. What do you mean by that, Mr. Marsh? Help me understand. Okay? Number two, judge rightly. Yes, we should judge, but we should judge rightly, properly. And number two, we should reason with persuasion, to be winsome, to try to sway the other person to our side. Questions? We'll come back and do this during the year at certain points, but I wanted you to be aware of it, because when you're conscious of these things, it'll actually help you sort out the details and add clarity.